The last of the three major problems that revolve around God's nature is the problem of predestination versus free will, right? And this is a problem that centers on God's omniscience. It's a very straightforward problem, but it also raises some complexities about the very notion of free will to begin with, which acts as a good lead into the next week's module. All right, so really quick, here's the basic structure of the problem. God is omniscient, all-knowing, which grants him divine foreknowledge. He knows everything you've done, that you are doing, and that you will do. Because remember, part of what another one of his characters is that he is eternal. He stands outside of space-time. Or if you want to rethink it, his omnipresence. He exists at all times and places simultaneously. And if he exists at all times and places simultaneously, that means that to him there is no such thing as a past, present, or a future, right? And so where we live time linearly, and thus we experience the idea of, having choices before us, time branching out. He already knows either God already knows what you will do, right? Because from his perspective, you are doing it and you have done it, right? It's set in stone. For God to be all-knowing in the important and meaningful sense, that means his knowledge has to be factual knowledge, right? It's true. What God knows is irrevocably, undeniably, unchangeably true. So his divine foreknowledge also needs to reflect that character, that sort of character. So what this means is that he knows if you will study for the final, and so this poses a problem, right? He knows if you do not study for the final, that you will fail the final, and then you must fail the final if you don't study for it, right? If you do not study for the final, then you must fail, right? And he knows, and if you must fail, then you can't have chosen otherwise. You can't have chosen to study for the final, right? That's the very character of his divine foreknowledge, that it is factual, right? He knows what you will wind up doing. And if you can't do otherwise, then how can you talk meaningfully about the idea of free will, right? Now, you might be able to say God knows all the probabilities, all the possible paths you would take instead of saying he knows everything as though it's a linear progression, and that this somehow preserves free will, but in which case he still knows all the facts beforehand. Knowing all possibilities and knowing all possible choices means that he knows means that part of it is part of knowing all that means knowing all the decisions in advance that would lead you one way or to one way or another. Right? So then, what important role does your free will actually play? Right? Uh, you're still not functionally acting freely, because freedom of will doesn't just mean freedom to choose one thing over another. It also functionally means freedom for your choice to affect a different outcome, right? For you, by your own will, to change the course of events. But if in knowing that a particular choice will lead to a particular event, right? How can you say then that path is already preset, even if your choice for it isn't, right? It's like it's a bit like a choose your own adventure. If you've ever read those old books, right, where it's turn if you want to do this or that, if you want option A, character to do option A, turn to page 72. If you want character to do option B, turn to page 39, right? Well, okay, yeah, you can effectively craft the adventure, but the reality is your choices don't amount to much, right? Since in that case either, since everything's already laid out, right? There's only so many paths that the book allows to take, right? And in choosing one path, you prune other decisions off, right? You're kind of forced along a certain uh, road. Your choices are, by their nature, limited by the very structure of the book. In the same way, God's divine foreknowledge might tell him all the possibilities that exist before you and all the possible choices that are necessary for all those possibilities, and it might not actually hinder your free will, so to speak, but that free will doesn't mean making one choice or another doesn't have any mm, actual impact, right, functionally. um, Put another way, right, we can phrase this as sort of the dilemma of free will. So if God has divine foreknowledge, then man is not free, right? If man is free, however, then God does not have divine foreknowledge. And if God does not have divine foreknowledge, then he isn't God any longer because he's no longer omniscient in the meaningful sense of the term. So it's a bit like, you know, a bull, right? A charging bull, right? You want to try and dodge the horns, but if you move to the left to try and dodge the right horn, you get gored by that. If you move trying to dodge the left horn by going right, you get gored by the right horn, right? What this shows is that either there's a problem with the very idea of omniscience as a concept, especially in the way that makes it meaningful for God to be omniscient, or there's a problem with the notion of free will that we're not exactly clear on. And so it's kind of up to you which side you fall on, but ultimately, it does point out that we need to look into what is free will and its nature, some of its possible natures.